Airbnb regulations are shaking up the industry and making it harder for investors to find good deals. But in this video, we're going to show you 3 different ways you can beat Airbnb regulations.
We are the Real Estate Robinsons.
Hey everyone, if this is your first time here, I'm Sarah.
I'm Tony.
And we're real estate investors who quit our day jobs by investing in Airbnbs, and we're here to show you how you can do the same.
So we recently hosted an online training, and near the end of that training, we took questions from the audience. And one question popped up over and over and over again, and it was something along the lines of, I'm afraid to buy an Airbnb and then the city shutting it down. So how do I choose the right city when it comes to Airbnb regulations? So basically people were worried about the regulations, right? They've seen what's been going on in the news in cities like New York City, and it's making them second guess buying that first Airbnb.
We totally get that regulations can be scary, but there is a way to hedge your bets and only buy in cities where the risk of regulation is super low. And we're gonna show you guys exactly how to do that in today's video.
But first, today's video is brought to you by Relay Financial. Relay is our business bank of choice, and we love powering our finances by Relay. We'll share a little bit more on them later, but for now, head over to relayfi.com/therealestaterobinsons to sign up for your first account.
So New York City has been all over the news lately because it effectively banned all Airbnbs from operating in the city. And what's scarier is that it's not the first big city to do this.
A legal battle's been going on in Austin, Texas, and after a lengthy court, battle, a federal judge actually recently shot down the laws that Austin had passed.
And the city of Las Vegas is being sued by Airbnb hosts.
And Atlanta passed a new ordinance that severely limited Airbnbs and increased taxes on Airbnb revenue.
And Dallas severely restricted what neighborhoods allowed for Airbnbs. And it's also being sued by local Airbnb hosts.
So the big question you're probably thinking is it too late to buy an Airbnb? Are regulations gonna just tear this industry apart? And honestly, we don't think so.
And the goal of today's video is to walk you through the steps you can take to beat Airbnb regulations and give yourself that best shot at running your Airbnb without any fear of the city changing its mind and shutting you down.
But first, is it really a bad thing the regulation is coming into the Airbnb space? Now, lots of people are upset about the regulations that have hit the Airbnb space in the last few years. And yeah, some of them are kind of outrageous, but honestly, most regulation across the country has been pretty fair, straightforward, and just follows common sense.
Things like making sure your smoke detectors are working, or paying to obtain a business license, having a phone number on file for noise complaints, not letting your guests throw parties and disrupt the neighborhood. Those are all rules and are all super fair in our opinion, and no host should really argue these rules.
So the way we look at it, a little bit of regulation isn't a bad thing, and pretty much every mature industry has some level of regulation. Like, I'm glad my doctor has to be licensed before he can perform surgery on me. And I'm glad truck drivers need to have certain licenses and their trucks need to pass certain requirements so they're keeping everyone else on the road safe. And I'm glad the SEC has rules that deter people from creating massive Ponzi schemes like Bernie Madoff.
Regulation isn't a bad thing, but since it is new to the Airbnb industry, so many freaking hosts are freaking out because for so long there was just no regulation.
But the right kind of regulation can do 3 things. First, once the regulation is in place, it stops a lot of the complaints from that, kind of small but vocal minority of local residents who want to end Airbnb altogether.
The Airbnb haters. Second, it keeps out the Airbnb hosts that are truly bad and don't belong on the platform anyway, and make the Airbnb haters.
And third, since regulations can make it harder for someone to list their property on Airbnb, it does kind of keep the supply of listings somewhat in check.
So we're sharing that to say, don't be afraid of regulation. As long as you know the rules and you follow the rules and do your best to choose cities where those rules won't eventually change in a way that hurts you, you'll be totally fine.
Which takes us to our next point. Something we hear from new Airbnb investors is, how do I figure out if an Airbnb is legal in a certain city? And for someone who's new to the space, we totally get how trying to figure this out can seem a little bit daunting. But the truth is that getting an answer to this question is a lot easier than it seems.
In fact, there are 3 super easy ways we found to get answers, so we'll list them out here in order of ease and convenience. First is going online, super easy. So most cities have their Airbnb regulations online. So if you just Google Airbnb regulations plus the city name or short-term rental regulations with the city name. Once you find the right webpage, just take the time to read through whatever information is posted. And most of the time, you should be able to find information on the regulations this way online. But sometimes you might run into a city or a county that's a little bit smaller or a little bit more old-fashioned, or doesn't have like the most up-to-date information on their website. So when that happens, go to strategy number 2,
which is picking up the phone. Right, if you're a millennial like us or younger, actually talking to people on the phone is probably your worst nightmare. But in this case, it's worth the trouble.
Especially the county or the city.
Yeah, especially the county or the city. But seriously, just pick up the phone, call the city, let them know that you're looking for information on the Airbnb permit process. And most of the time, you should be able to get directed to the right person. We actually really like this method, even above just looking online, because sometimes the information you read online can be a bit confusing or may not be super clear. So being able to talk to someone who knows the code can be pretty helpful. So honestly, even if you do find the information online, it probably wouldn't hurt to still pick up the phone and call so you can make sure you really understand that process.
And that it's up to date.
Now,
the third and final strategy for getting answers is going in person. If you're close enough to drive to City Hall or you've got the budget and time to fly in, then totally do that. In the same way that talking to someone on the phone is better than reading something on the internet, talking to the city in person is way better than the phone.
Now, we've done this a few times, and without fail, we feel like we've walked away with way more information after an in-person conversation than we would have if we would have stopped at the first 2 steps.
For whatever reason, people are just more social in person. You don't feel as rushed to move through the conversations or afraid to ask questions as you do by phone. And the city employees are usually a lot nicer in person too. So if you can swing the trip, take it.
Now, before we leave this topic, we wanted to call out one source you should absolutely never rely on when doing your research here, and that's word of mouth. Just because your Uncle Jim told you that he heard from a friend who knows someone at City Hall that the rules are XYZ, you should never take that at face value. Always follow up with your own research as well. Now, before we keep going, we wanted to share that we've officially launched our Airbnb coaching program. It's called Alpha Host Academy. And our goal within Alpha Host is to help you get your first property in the next 90 days. It's a 12-month program, but the goal is to get you that first property in the next 90 days. And guys, you'll get a mix of on-demand content, group coaching, one-on-one coaching, what's called our done-for-you deal analyzer, access to our Market Monday calls, tons of resources so that you can come in, move quickly, and get that first deal. So if you want to learn more, book a totally free discovery call by heading over to alphahostacademy.com.
One of the principles that we've preached over and over again is this: if you're planning to buy a property as an Airbnb and really as a short-term rental, you want to make sure that you're buying in a city that has a strong economic incentive to protect the Airbnb in that city.
Now, you want to buy in a city that is pretty much economically dependent on the revenue generated by Airbnbs, and that the guests that are staying in those Airbnbs as well. Now, ideally, you want a local community that values tourism as opposed to a community that's actively fighting it.
And let's quickly define what we mean when we say economically dependent, right? So we're saying that the city's local economy would pretty much collapse if all of the Airbnbs and all of their guests magically disappeared overnight.
Because when a city is economically dependent on Airbnbs, it's going to be more willing to protect those Airbnbs, even if a small but vocal minority of residents are upset.
So we'll cover 3 economic clues that show you how much a city relies on its Airbnbs for its money.
Now, we'll use New York as an example of a city that fails all 3 economic clues, and then we'll compare to a few well-known vacation hotspots, which are Destin, Florida, Joshua Tree, California, and Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, all of which pass all 3 economic clues.
So economic clue number 1, we call it the resident to tourist ratio. So basically, we want to compare the number of people who live in that city full-time to the number of visitors that city gets every single year. The bigger the difference between full-time residents and visitors, the better. Because if there are fewer people living there full-time, then there's a pretty good chance that it's the visitors who are really driving that economy.
So let's look at New York City and compare it to our 3 vacation hotspots for this resident to tourist ratio. Now, New York City has 8.5 million full-time residents and sees 57 million tourists every year. That's a ratio of 1 resident to every 7 visitors. Now, Destin, Florida has 14,000 residents and sees 3.6 million visitors every year. That's one resident to every 257 tourists. Joshua Tree, 8,000 residents and sees 3 million visitors. And that's just to the national park. So not even including people that like go to the city but never go into the park. 3 million just to the park. But even still, that's one resident to every 375 tourists. And last, Pigeon Forge has 6,500 residents and sees 11 million visitors. That's one resident to every 1,700 tourists.
So hopefully you can see the massive difference here. New York is 1 to 7. Pigeon Forge is 1 to 1,700. So that's massive. So again, you want to see big differences in the number of full-time residents and visitors. The bigger the difference, the better.
Economic clue number 2. You want to look at the number of big businesses and ideally big business headquarters in that city. Now, the reason we're checking for this is because if there are tons of big businesses that are headquartered in that city, then that alone is going to drive economic activity in that city because businesses hire employees and employees live locally and they pay taxes and they spend money at the local stores and they generate revenue for that city.
But when there's no big corporate headquarters, or even if there's a lack of offices in general, then that's another big sign that it's the tourism and the visitors that are driving the economy. So let's compare New York City to our 3 vacation hotspots.
Now here's a list of some of the companies that are headquartered in New York City. JP Morgan & Chase, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Citigroup, American Express, The New York Times Company, Time Warner Inc., Viacom CBS, NBC Universal, Ralph Lauren, Calvin Klein, Estee Lauder, Tiffany & Company, IBM, Deloitte, McKinsey & Company, MetLife Inc., American International Group, Penguin Random House, HarperCollins, Colgate-Palmolive, Verizon. And here is a combined list of all the companies headquartered in either Joshua Tree, Destin, or Pigeon Forge. None. There's not a single company headquartered in any of those cities. There aren't even any big offices for major companies in any of those cities.
And again, that's a good sign for us as Airbnb hosts.
Now, before we hit the next clue on our list, we wanted to talk quickly about Relay Financial and why it's such an important part of our Airbnb business. And honestly, all the other businesses that we run as well, our cleaning company, our property management company, our commercial company, our media and events company, our coaching program, everything runs through Relay Financial. And believe it or not, choosing the wrong business bank can actually cause you a ton of work and extra headaches. We had issues paying our cleaners and handymen because Venmo and Zelle had caps that we run into every single week. And when you got 30 properties, it's very easy to hit those caps and then you got to tell your cleaner, hey, sorry, we can't pay you today. Can you wait till next week? Nobody wants to hear that.
The other downside with Venmo was that it made bookkeeping way harder. Every time we sent a payment, we'd have to take a screenshot of the Venmo transaction and email that screenshot to, I was emailing it either to Tony or our bookkeeper. It was a hot mess. I was very confused and we weren't perfect with that process. So it really felt like we were just digging through our Venmo transactions, through all these emails and text messages, trying to remember why I sent $75 to A, B, and C 12 months ago. It was crazy.
But with Relay, you have the ability to send same-day ACH transfers to any vendor that you choose. This is basically just like Venmo or Zelle, but it's built into the banking platform. And the beauty of it is that you're able to attach a little note to every transaction, to every payment that you send. So now all our bookkeeper has to do is go through all of our transactions at the end of the month, see the notes that are attached, and she can very clearly see what each payment was for. And typically what we'll do is we'll just like put the little code from our bookkeeping, like our chart of accounts, we'll include that inside of our payment, and then she's got all the information that she needs.
It's so much easier.
Another thing that we really love about Relay is the ability to create multiple virtual debit cards. Now, if you've ever opened up a business bank account, sometimes you've got to wait 7 to 10 business days to get your account. With Relay, you can open up your account and almost immediately you've got a virtual debit card you can use to start spending. The other thing I love about the virtual debit cards is that you can assign them to certain team members. So we've got virtual assistants that help within our business, and we can give them a debit card that's just for them. So now I know any transaction tied to that debit card came from that team member. And I can put spending limits on those debit cards. So say I want my VA to maybe be able to order paper towels, she's gonna spend $50. I can put the cap at 50 every single month and not have to worry about it. So I don't have to worry about her, not that I think she would, she's a great person.
Running off to New York City to buy a ton of bags.
Yeah.
But that was like a big concern of mine. I was the one ordering stuff and I was like, oh my God, bookkeeping, I hate it. So it solved that problem. And then now to order, that was always on my plate. So like Tony said, now we have this awesome feature with Relay where we aren't so paranoid to have someone just steal all of our money. So yeah, thanks Relay.
So we've got a full video. We'll link to it in the description about how we use Relay to run our business. But guys, head over to relayfi.com/therealestaterobinsons and you guys can sign up for Relay. But guys, we get that this doesn't sound like something that's super sexy, but believe me when I say
it's sexy.
Yeah, choosing the right business bank is crucial to being able to scale this business. And I think pretty much everyone in our coaching program is using Relay as well. So it really is something that we truly believe in and hope you guys can use in your business.
Highly recommend.
The third and final economic clue is the number of hotels that are available in that city. Now, we want to look at this for a few reasons, right? If there's a strong hotel presence, then even if the city is heavily reliant on travel and tourism, the hotels probably provide enough rooms for those travelers to stay in.
So the city can shut down Airbnbs and not really be impacted because those travelers will just move to the hotels instead. So what we're looking for are cities where there's a smaller number of hotels in comparison to the number of travelers. Now, oddly enough, finding the number of hotels in a city isn't super easy. So we used the best method we could think of and checked TripAdvisor to see how many hotels were listed there. And here are the numbers.
New York City has 1,563 different hotels. Pigeon Forge has 101, Destin, Florida has 46, and Joshua Tree has 5.
And which 5, girl? I have no idea because
there's some small ones, like some super small ones.
Oh, really? Like maybe just like look right past them when you're driving,
Yeah. So it's super easy to see why New York City was able to ban Airbnbs without their travel industry really taking a hit. And just think, there's over 1,500 hotels, but a lot of those hotels has hundreds or even thousands of rooms. So there's a lot of space for travelers to go.
But for our vacation hotspots, the number of hotels are pretty limited. So it's clear here that the Airbnb industry is housing a really good portion of all the tourists and travelers.
Now, take these 3 economic clues and use them to help you choose your next Airbnb city with confidence. Now, obviously, this plan isn't foolproof, and there's always a chance that even the most mature vacation hotspot could see regulation change in a way that maybe isn't ideal for us as the hosts. But we're banking our business on the strategy because we feel it's the best way to hedge against that risk while still giving us the confidence to buy new properties in new cities.
So this works for us in our business, but no hard feelings if that doesn't work for you in your business. And before we go, please connect with us on Instagram. I'm at Sarah Rad Robinson. My sexy husband here is at Tony J. Robinson. And if you're on TikTok, make sure to follow us. We share a little bit more of our personal life there. It's at The Real Estate Robinsons.
And again, if you guys like what you heard in this video and you really want to take your Airbnb business to the next level, if you want help launching your first Airbnb in the next 90 days, book a free call with our team to learn more about Alpha Host Academy. Just head over to alphahostacademy.com and we'd love to work with you. That's it for today, guys. I'm Tony.
I'm Sarah.
And we are
The Real